Hey there, alright, we're going to do terrains, yay! Okay, terrains are lots of fun, but there are a lot of things you have to get right about them, and just a lot of little things. There's plenty of tutorials, I think, on YouTube and stuff, so feel free to have a look after you've seen this one. Anyway, so I've got my little project here, and this is kind of, you might want to relate this to your pool project, because I've got the pool area, say, and stuff like that. Just ignore anything else that's in there. And because of the trees thing, we want to add a terrain to it. So easy peasy, same as usual. Game object, 3D object, terrain. You'll notice it comes in really big because they're meant to be, sort of world-sized things. It comes in at 500 by 500, which is 500 meters, I do believe. And as you can see, its origin point is over in the corner here. It's not in the center. So that becomes an issue. I mean, it would be really nice if you could rotate terrains and stuff like that to make, endless things that you could drive on with mountains on either side. I mean, that would be very cool, but you can't do it because terrains are separate, very optimized objects. They are very efficient, and that's why you can have a huge area and still get decent frame rates. Cabin in the Woods thing uses a terrain, and as you can see, it's pretty large, and there are larger ones. Anyway, so that's where the terrain is right now. It's 500 by 500. If you see the inspector stuff over here, the first thing you want to do is, well, that's not the first thing you want to do. The first thing you want to do is go into your project assets, right-click, create material. And this material you're going to call terrain ground or something, doesn't matter. And you're going to change the type from standard to nature, terrain, diffuse. And this is a specific type of material that the terrain will accept in order to put textures on the terrain itself. Otherwise, the textures do not show up in Flipside. They will show up in the editor, but not in Flipside. So you have to use this little guy here. So that's that. Now you have to go back to terrain and your settings. And then this material, you have to change that from built-in standard to custom, which will expose the material chooser. And then you find the one you just created, which in our case was called terrain ground. And now that's selected. Now it can actually show in Flipside. So we can get rid of that, or we'll go somewhere else here. Okay, and because the terrain ground thing, I didn't assign an actual texture to it, so let's go do that. So where are we? Terrain ground. And oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, no, that doesn't matter. Sorry. Getting confused. It's been a while since I did it. So that's basically done. It doesn't have to have a texture, diffuse, or anything on it. It's just a type of material that represents this. Go back to our terrain. Now we want to add a texture to it. So in that case, you would go into this paintbrush, and it shows you all the different paintbrushes, which is cool. And you want to edit the textures because no terrain textures are defined. So add a texture, and then you can go in here and just click select, and then go find one. And the assets that were imported usually have a ground texture of some sort, but you can use your own. Like you can import your own textures and use anything you want. So this is a sand one here. We'll just click on that. And that's good, so that makes it sand, and there is no normal for that one, but you'll find some textures do have normals, and it accepts them and works with them real nice, so you can get a nice rocky kind of thing with normals in it, and it'll look quite good. So, and the other thing here is this size of the tiling. So it's default at 15, and you'll find if you buy a terrain on Unity assets, this may be a very large thing. So when you go in there and you look at the ground, it'll look like crap because it's very low tile. Or yeah, anyway. So the higher number here, it's kind of, it's a little bit counterintuitive compared to tiling on materials. That the higher number here, the worse it's going to look because it uses a fewer number of tiles to cover the same area. So if we change this, it's going to use 15 tiles to cover a certain area. I don't know what that actually means in terms of area, but and it comes in little squares, and it uses this number of this material in that little square to tile in there. So if we change this and turn it down, we're going to get the maximum resolution on our tiles. So we'll turn that down to 1. You can experiment if you like. Click Add, and there, that becomes our primary texture, and you'll notice that it changed right away to become the primary texture. And they always look a little different. This is very dark, and this is quite light. That may be just a function of the zoom, I don't know. But, I mean, basically it is sandy texture, but it doesn't look as dark. I don't know. That's just the way it goes. Now, the other thing we want to do, because your set isn't large. Now, if you want to extend out the ground from your pool set, well, you might just use that in its pure form. And 500 by 500, that'd be quite a little desert. Anyway, you have to move it over to where your spawn point is. So the confluence of those two arrow lines and that square is where the center is. So just kind of center it as best you can. Doesn't really, it's not critical. So now it's centered on that area, and that's cool. The one thing you'll find is that it probably has a different origin point in the Y. So if we go right back here, no, it's at 0, 0. So that's okay. Now that has implications for the future, and we'll get to those later. Especially if you have something that drops down in here, that is a, you know, like your pool. You know, you're not going to want the terrain to intersect with your pool at the top of the pool, because then you won't be able to see the depth of the pool. So in that case, if you've got something there that you need to go down, what you have to do is displace the terrain down a bit. And then the fun part is you have to raise the terrain selectively up to come closer to where the edge of your surface is. In that case, it would be the concrete around the pool. And so we get into one of the fun parts of terrain. So we'll go back to terrain here, and these icons here are for changing the level of the terrain. One of them is and it'll tell you what it is, raise or lower terrain, and it'll say click to raise. So, and this is when you've got one thing selected here, you'll notice you'll get the size, brush size settings and stuff. So you change your brush size, and you click, and wow, yeah, that's what you get. Now that's probably, it's good for doing mountains and hills and stuff, but it's not good for this case, unless you want to put some around the periphery, and then you can play with that. But what you can do here is another little thing, is you can raise and lower terrain and set it to a specific height. So you choose this paint height thing, and then you hold down Shift and click at the height, and watch here, because this will change over here, at the height that you want to paint. So then you just go back and you start painting the height, and you'll see it'll come up to the level that you selected. And you can again tweak that by just tweaking this by little amounts, but that's up to you. So it's, I mean, it's not perfect, so you might want to change it to 8, I don't know. Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, I don't know, it didn't change it much. So and we'll just change it to 7. Well, anyway, it's not changing much. Anyway, so you can do that. But now the thing is, if you have a cutout here like your pool and you want to lower it, you just go to this raise lower terrain height again, and you hold shift click and change your size here, so you can just target right around the pool. You hold shift and then you can click in this area and it's actually lowering it down, and you'll see in your pool that the stuff kind of disappears down. I could show you that probably by just moving the terrain around a bit. So you can see it's down lower. So that's cool. Okay, so that's those things out of the way. The other cool thing is in here, and this isn't meant to be like a full tutorial. You should again look up details for this stuff elsewhere. We can add more textures. You can add as many textures as you want, as far as I know. So you add another texture, do the same thing. Let's call it. We must have some grass here. Yeah, so we got grass. I don't really care what it is, so we'll just choose that one. And again, no normal, but that's okay. We do an add. Texture wrap mode must be set to repeat. Oh, okay, so that texture is not one we can use. Anyway, it helps if you have your own textures, because they don't beats egg. Get a palm frond. That work? Yeah, that worked. So we can add, and it's a palm frond now, but that's going to be weird, obviously. So we just want to paint palm fronds. So we got to select it, make sure it's selected, then you can paint. You know, it's nuts, but then you can go back and edit the textures. Make sure you've got it selected. You edit texture. You change this down to a 1 and 1, and you can see how it affects it. So that's very cool. So now if you go down closer, I mean it's a bizarro texture for that, but anyway. So now let's do the trees, because that's another thing. So these are your trees. It's kind of it's called a speed tree system, and it's very efficient. You can have 100 trees and it doesn't slow things down too much. Now, for Flipside, you probably want to reduce that. But anyway, again, you have to add a tree, and then click here and go find them. Now, the ones that were brought in with the asset pack would be the Palm Desktop, Conifer Desktop. Now, you'll find some of these are a little weird. The desktop ones seem to work good, or the mobile one works good, but you get some weird billboarding effects with some of the other ones, so that when you move, the thing will rotate. And I don't know if that's just a VR thing. The Palm Desktop works fine, so in this case, you're good for using that. So you just add it. Now we've got a tree, which is cool, and the same thing again. Set your size of your brush and the tree density. So if you want to do a lot of trees really quick, oh yeah, just paint them in. So that's cool. So that's really dense. Probably too dense if you want to put them close here. Just turn down the density way down, and you can click quick. You only get 1 or 2 at a time. And now all of these will animate with the wind, which is very, very, very cool. And I don't necessarily change these. What it'll do is actually rotate them at random so that they look a little better. And if you want to delete them, if you find out you've got some intersecting other stuff, hold down Shift, and then you can just remove them the same way. It's very slick. And then what else we got here? Terrain smooth height. So if you put in a really radical mountain, like yeah, and you know it happens very quick, so you got to be a little judicious in your use of the click. You can then smooth things, and it'll bring them down and make them into more of a hill than a mountain. But as you can see, it's very, very slick, and the use of these tools is quite intuitive. Once you get onto one of them, they all work about the same. I don't know if I'd play with the lighting. I haven't myself. But you'll find when you do have a terrain in the scene, it'll turn on the auto-generate, and then it'll generate light maps for that. But it doesn't seem to affect anything. It just takes some time. So it turns this on. You can just turn it off if you don't want to do that. Other than that, yeah, it's generally pretty slick. You'll notice your directional light will affect the shadows, so it becomes a little more significant depending on what kind of look you want. If you want a late in the afternoon kind of look, or if the shadows aren't going the right way. So that's very slick. And as I said, you can have quite a few trees before it starts to bog down your CPU and GPU stuff. Obviously, you would use different ground textures instead of the palm leaf to make your ground more interesting and not just a big sand pile. Anyway, you'll have fun with that, I have no doubt. So enjoy, and we'll talk.